I'm Brendan Appel with Sons of Speed, and this is the 2015 Corvette Stingray Z51.
On January 17, 1953, at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, Chevrolet unveiled something to the world that forever changed the American sports car landscape. With the quintessential 1950s name of GM Motorama, Chevrolet showed off its white two-door convertible sports car with a red interior, the only color combination available on that very first 1953 Corvette. Despite having little in the way of power, the Corvette was an instant hit with the public and went on sale a short 6 months after its unveiling. Almost exactly 60 years later, Chevrolet introduced the 7th generation Corvette, known as the C7, at the Detroit Auto Show, resurrecting the Stingray name for the first time since 1976. The C7 has come a long way since the days of the 150 horsepower blue flame 6-cylinder found in that very first Corvette. Today's Stingray comes packed with a nearly all-new 6.2-liter small-block LT1 V8 rated at 455 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque with a standard exhaust, and 5 more of each when you opt for the adjustable performance exhaust system. While the LT1 traces its heritage directly back to the legendary 1955 Chevy small block with its cam and block, 2 valves per cylinder, old-school architecture, this trick new engine features direct injection, continuously variable valve timing, and cylinder deactivation to achieve not only its awesome power, but nearly 30 miles per gallon on the highway by shutting off half its cylinders at cruising speeds. C7 buyers can now opt for a standard 7-speed manual transmission or a new for 2015 8-speed automatic. On the outside, the Stingray is both striking and beautiful, a design like the first and second generation that will stand the test of time. The front fascia and headlights reflect a very Italian-esque look, so much so we ran into one gas station attendant who was looking out the window and asked us how we liked our Ferrari. The back of the car won't be mistaken for anything Italian though, and despite it missing the trademark round taillights, it still conveys to everyone trying to catch up with you that this is a Corvette. Moving inside, you might just forget this is a Chevy. From the stitched leather to the carbon fiber dash to the decidedly un-GM-like textured plastics and aluminum trim, this is a truly world-class interior. As one of our testers remarked, getting into the Stingray is like dropping into an F-16 fighter jet. Everything important is oriented to the driver. The passenger is expected to sit down and hold on.
For me, the C7 Corvette Stingray reminds me a lot of my very first car, a 1988 Bertone X19. That car also had 2 seats, a target top. It's a great handling sports car, but it did have about 400 less horsepower. So what happens if you take that same winning formula, add another 400 horsepower? We're about to find out.
On the street, the Stingray is composed and docile, until you tell it not to be. Then it will try to slap your eyeballs against the backside of your skull. Out on roads like this is where the Corvette is most happy, literally straightening the curves with its 1.02 Gs of lateral acceleration. And yes, it will do ridiculous burnouts.
Out of the 5 driving modes, the ones that you really want to know about are sport and track. The other ones, eco mode allows you to shut down half the motor and get the highest mileage. Touring is for a cushier ride. Exhaust that doesn't sound quite as loud and obnoxious. But the one you really want is sport mode for most of your daily driving, as long as you're not in a place with a lot of potholes, and track mode when you get out on the track. Chevy doesn't advise that you put the car in a track mode on the street because the suspension travel is so short that if you do hit a pothole, you're probably going to bend a rim and maybe do some damage to the suspension as well. So the Corvette has the 5 driving modes: eco, weather, touring, sport, track. But if you have the magnetic ride control, which I highly suggest that you do get, in track mode, you've got 5 additional driving modes within that setting. And those are basically based on what the conditions of the track are and what your skills as a driver might be. So if the conditions are wet, you've got a wet mode. If the conditions are dry and you're not too familiar with the track, or you're not too comfortable with your skills at that particular track, then you definitely want to keep it in dry mode. Sport 1, and the difference between these modes obviously is how much play the car is going to give you. So in Sport 1, you get a little more rotational ability before the traction control kicks in and saves your bacon. Sport 2 has no stability control and some traction control. And in race mode, you've got no traction control and no stability control. The ELSD, that's all you're going to get as far as help goes. So you better really know what you're doing if you're going to put it in race mode. We recommend that you keep it in Sport 1 mode if you're going to be out on the track. But for street driving, you've got this mode select down here, which changes the modes for you, left, right, and I like that you go right to get faster and left to get softer. There's a stability or traction control button. You push that once to turn traction control off. You hold it down for, I think it's 5 seconds, and that'll turn the stability control off as well. But again, you want to be very careful before you end up doing that, getting out on the street, putting the power down and having the car rotate on you, and then you end up on Corvette crash fails on YouTube or something. Not a good idea. So one of the neatest things about the Stingray's navigation system is, and we all know how hard it is to find certain things when you've got to enter an address, or you don't know the address is even worse, trying to find a location. What you can do now through the OnStar app is go in there, go to their map section, search for whatever you're looking for as if you're doing a Google search, find it in there, and then send it to the car. And it comes right up here on the navigation screen, and all you have to do is hit go.
Leave the traffic circle at the 3rd exit after 1/2 mile.
And the nice lady will tell you where to go. So the Stingray shifter, it's a 7-speed. It's just so cool. I mean, why stop at 6 when you can go to 7, right? The 7-speed has very positive shifts. It's very beefy. It's a little bulky. It can get hung up if you're not entirely careful with the gates. But for the most part, it works really, really well. So GM has really done a fabulous job fixing up the interior of the Corvette. Really, since about the C2, you can't call any of the other Corvette generation interiors elegant, world-class, beautiful. But you can really say those things about the new C7. This is really an interior that GM can be proud of, that you as a Corvette owner can be proud of, and you don't have to apologize for the car's interior and seats when you're talking about, yeah, but it's got a lot of horsepower. This one has a lot of horsepower, and it's a beautiful car inside. So the question I get asked a lot is, with respect to the magnetic ride, is it worth it? And I can emphatically say, yes, it is. If you are going to buy a Stingray and do anything other than drag race it, you probably want to opt for the magnetic ride. The modes, definitely you can feel a difference. So you go from touring to sport, or sport to touring, you feel that difference immediately. And on the track, there's no comparison that the performance management traction system that you get with the magnetic ride is definitely something you want to have when you're out on the racetrack. So, is the Stingray perfect? Not exactly. First, there is a trunk release switch right here, which you will definitely hit from time to time coming into the car, which requires you to get out of the car, close the trunk, come back in, and hopefully don't do it again. Closing the lid on a 14 or 15 Stingray is also a little difficult at times. You do kind of have to slam it. You can push on it with both left and right at certain points. But for 16, they added a power cinch that will eliminate the problems people have been having in closing the rear hatch. For 16, they've also added 2 front cameras to keep the front end from getting crunched over parking blocks or things along those lines, which is why you see a lot of Corvette owners backing into spaces. It's not really to look cool, it's so that they don't crunch the front of the car on something. Other than that, the seats can be a little narrow at the bottom, although at the sides they hold you wonderfully well. But at the bottom, if you're kind of tall like I am and your legs spread out, you can feel that bolster is really digging in there. It gets better over time. This car now has almost 9,000 miles on it, so it's better now than it was when the car was brand new. But other than that, there really is nothing to complain about the Stingray of. This is a world-class interior. Chevrolet and General Motors have finally brought the interior of the Corvette up to par with the design, with the power, with the transmission, with the balance, with what it can do on the racetrack. It is definitely come into its own as a world-class sports car. There's no apologies you have to make anymore for the Corvette, and this C7 is definitely the best of the best. And if this portends what is to come for General Motors and Chevrolet in the coming years, then General Motors is definitely in the driver's seat. We can't wait to see how this design and the philosophy carries over to what has happened with the new Camaro being redesigned for 2016, because that has been described as a baby Corvette. So, when we get our hands on one of those, we'll be back. But for now, this is Brendan Appel with Sons of Speed, and we'll catch you next time.
If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe, and don't forget to check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.